All right, what's going on, real estate family? So here's my part 2 video into home ownership versus renting, which one is better. Now, what's funny is both parties are sitting here arguing with each other about which one's better. And to me, you know what it sounds like? Looking at it from a distance, you're only arguing about who you're in debt to the best, right? Because if you're a homeowner, you're in debt to a financial institution / loan officer. If you're a tenant, you're in debt to your landlord. So what is the pride and joy about saying I'm in better debt than you are? You both have to owe somebody. Wouldn't the goal be to have your own capital and cash and not have to owe nobody nothing, and you own everything outright? You could be your own landlord and your bank at the same time. But because most people don't have the capital to do that, they have to go one of these two ways, right? So this is why I said, to me, it's like a pointless conversation, because it comes down to what individuals value. I'm big on consumer debt, because there's a lot of consumers who either own a house or they're renting, and they have debt beyond the payment to be able to obtain that dwelling, right? For example, a car payment, that's not part of your cost. Student loans, that's not something you factor in to live in a house. You can live or not live in a house and still have these debts. So car payment, student loans, credit cards, like all of that stuff is extra outside stuff that should not be factored in, but it has to be factored in because you've obtained it. Now it becomes part of your payment. And when you're living check to check, you have additional debt. It makes it harder, whether you're a homeowner or a tenant. Let's be real, guys. Homeowners and tenants both have to pay the mortgage or the rent. And it gets tight when you have all those other fees, not including groceries and gas. Like, there's just so much out there, guys. So this is why I said, why are we arguing about who has the best person to be in debt with? Instead, let's focus on consumer debt at the basic core level and figure out how can we minimize that outside payments to have more money coming in and less money going out, and have more control over what we are approaching. And I'm no financial expert, but I have a basic level of things because I'm in real estate as a licensed realtor. I own a home and I've rented before. And when I've seen all these at different levels, I come to the conclusion that neither one is better than the other. The home ownership crowd, they're going to argue, I have equity and appreciation and I'm not throwing away money in rent, right? And my mortgage stays fixed. Valid point. But the tenants are going to argue, while you have appreciation and equity, you can only use it when you refinance, which means you're going to have to spend more money in closing costs to refinance, and you risk increasing your rate from where it was. You know, it could go lower, but it can also go higher, which means your monthly mortgage is going to go higher. And then your loan starts over. So now you're back to square one. After 10 years, you refinance. Now you got to be in another 30 years. And then tenants can also say you have PMI, assuming you have PMI in your mortgage. Some don't, but most do. You have a HOA, some do, some don't. You have property taxes, and you have maintenance and repair fees. So you have more recurring fees at a higher expense than I do as a tenant, right? And then therefore, guess what? You're paying more money up front than I am. So you might gain more in appreciation on the back end, but that appreciation that you're gaining that I'm not as a tenant, I could use the money that you pay up front for all those fees that I just named and invest in something else like stocks or other real estate and become a landlord myself while I'm renting. It's no different than a homeowner buying a duplex and renting out their other unit to make money while they pay the mortgage, right? It's the same thing, very similar. So at the end of the day, I think it's tit for tat. I think it comes down to what individuals value. Although tenants don't have like property taxes from a property complex, right? They do have amenity fees. And being honest, you don't know, but your property owner who owns that complex could slip property taxes into those amenity fees on the low. But even if they do, it's still nowhere near what a homeowner's paying. A homeowner's gonna be paying quite a few thousand for that. A tenant, if it's spread out between like 100 people, it's not even gonna be noticeable, right? It's gonna be very, very, very low, but you probably aren't paying for it more than likely. Most municipalities don't require that from the tenant, but I'm just saying people who own an apartment complex could slip that in the amenity fee, but that's very small. At the end of the day, there are some markets where the mortgage is cheaper than the rent, and there are some markets where the rent is cheaper than the property taxes on a house that's paid off. And at the end of the day, it really depends on your investment outside of your consumer debt, right? If you have investments, whether you're a homeowner or a tenant, in things that are building you capital, doesn't matter if it's on the back end or front end, as long as it's building capital and you have lesser debt in the consumer debt phase, man, you're in a better position. But that's the link that people are missing, and then they're arguing about who's in the best debt. It makes no sense to me. You have extra debt outside of that, and that's going to take away from all that stuff you're talking about anyway. So let's focus on having less debt on the outside that's not required to live, and let's focus on how to bring money in and make use of that. There's some people who own homes that live above their means, Are they really in a better financial situation than someone who's a tenant? Because guess what? The payments become more when the property tax goes up in value and they can't afford a home, right? They end up having to sell it. They end up having to downsize. So you could have did that from the beginning when you first invested, live below your means. Just like same thing with tenants. They end up getting in areas that cost more than their budget. Then they end up having to move out and find a place and they have nowhere to go because everything's up priced. They might should have started where somewhere was lower from the beginning with and save up that capital, and then they can eventually buy a house to, as an investment. Living under the means, guys, that's the whole goal here, and having less debt and more money coming in. Many blessings.